Well, Dragon Ball fans, we're here at last. After 131 episodes, nearly 3 years of Japanese airtime, and roughly 1 billion forum posts complaining about how long the Tournament of Power was, Dragon Ball Super has finally come to an end. It's been a hell of a ride, full of ups, downs, and good lord the all-arounds. And what better way to mark this occasion than to look back on everything that's happened, take it all in, and discuss the best thing about Dragon Ball Super. Obviously, that's a bit of a loaded question, considering how many things Super did, and how many of those were beloved by the fandom. The future Trunks arc, the introduction of Ultra Instinct, those sexy Universe 9 wolves. Oh. How could I possibly decide, let alone make such an outrageous claim that is sure to divide the fandom into chunks? Would it make it less outrageous if I said that the best thing about Super wasn't actually in the show itself, and that it was how it impacted at least a portion of the Dragon Ball community? Yes, I'm taking the holistic approach, and that might not be what you came here for, but I feel it is important enough to warrant discussion, as I hope you'll see. Also, I know I did this gag in the previous episode, but I probably should also point out I've never actually watched Dragon Ball Super, so this is literally the only thing I can actually talk about. So, what exactly did Super do? Simple. It encouraged a section of the fandom to become more educated about the animation and overall presentation of not just Dragon Ball, but animated works in general, if completely by accident. There have always been people in the Dragon Ball community who would discuss the animation of the series in depth, but this tended to make up a very small fraction of that fandom, comprised mainly of animators and animation enthusiasts. If you were aware of this group before 2015, it was likely because you were a part of that group. Of course, the discussion grew prior to that in the early 2010s, thanks to the production of specials and movies, but most of it tended to revolve around comparisons between the series' recent character designs, provided by series mainstay Tadayoshi Yamamuro, and the more well-liked Z-era designs. It wasn't until Super began airing that Dragon Ball fans started paying more attention to the animation, the designs, the storyboarding, and just about every aspect of the show's visual presentation. And I believe that it all started with Episode 5. Episode 5 was a lot of things to a lot of people. An internet meme that quickly outstayed its welcome after the first hour or so, a straw man to be used in misguided comparisons proving why modern animation sucks so hard, but most importantly, it was a sign of how bad Dragon Ball Super's production was. You might remember that Dragon Ball Super was announced back in late April of 2015, with the intent of airing in July later that year. However, that announcement wasn't to just say that the show existed, but rather to announce that the show had begun production. Animation production, especially for TV shows that air on a weekly basis, is a notoriously labor-intensive process, and a lot has to be planned in advance to make sure that the show does not suffer from any unexpected hang-ups or disasters. Characters have to be designed, scripts have to be written, directors and storyboard artists need to flesh out those scripts, animators have to animate whatever cuts they've been assigned to, etc., etc. When there's so much to be done, you need as much time as possible for everything to be done to the best of its ability. Usually, when discussing a show like Dragon Ball Super, it's best to compare its production time to similar long-running big-name series. According to Kevin/Yuyucow, a regular contributor to the Sakagaburu supplementary Sakuga blog, most shows tend to give each team in the staff rotation about a month and a half to animate their episode before moving to the next one, with Toei directors disappearing in a very regular way at least half a year before their next show starts. For reference, Dragon Ball Super was originally directed by Kimitoshi Chioka, who wasn't quite able to disappear since he, in Yuyucow's words, regularly worked on various Toei shows up until Super's debut. The ones that were closest to its broadcast beginning were One Piece Episode 690, which aired less than 3 months before Super's start, and World Trigger Episode 35, which was a couple of weeks before Super's start. And let's go back to that announcement date and make a quick calculation. Production began in late April to be aired in early July, which left how much time for Super before it was due to broadcast? Just a little over 2 months. Yes, 2 months. It was a desperate move made by a production committee desperate to capitalize on the then recent success of the Battle of Gods and Resurrection F movies, which happened to be retold as the first 2 story arcs for the series. Dragon Ball creator Akira Toriyama intended this to get new viewers up to speed on what was going on, particularly with the character Beerus. But it's possible that someone up high might have seen this as a reason to kick off production so early. After all, when there's already so much groundwork laid by the production materials made for the movies now being retold, why not get started as soon as possible? Well, there's the problem that somewhere along the line, a decision was made to make brand new animation for the episodes instead of just reusing the animation from the movies, perhaps to have a more natural narrative flow given that there would be changes made in the adaptation to TV. So even though there is a good foundation in place, the animation studio still got a lot of work on its hands with directing, storyboarding, and animating those episodes. On that note, if you have a production schedule that embarrassingly short, you need an animation studio who will have the available time, staff, and resources to do everything they can to get the show done on time. Unfortunately, said studio was Toei Animation, who were, at that time, a particularly busy studio with numerous TV shows in production, not to mention the feature-length One Piece special episode of Sabo, which was due to air just over a month after Super began. There just wasn't enough people available in-house to salvage the production, and those who were available had just recently finished working on either the Resurrection F movie or the Disc Wars Avengers TV series, meaning that not even they would be able to find the time to do the episodes justice, at least not without a good deal of outsourcing. So just to summarize, we have a show that was launched into production on very short notice, with a deadline that was just barely a third of what would be considered the standard amount of time for preparation, by an animation studio that already had a lot on its hands, with a crew that had just finished working on other shows and films, led by a director who was still contributing to yet more shows when they were meant to be preparing for this show. Is it any wonder that things turned out the way they did? Now, this didn't seem immediately apparent, unless you were paying attention to how Super's social media accounts posted character designs from the recent films, or that one screenshot of the ending over and over again. The first 4 episodes of Super looked fairly presentable, all things considered, though it's worth remembering that this was within the month-and-a-half production time needed to make a single episode, which would have been well within the capabilities of the teams assigned to the first 4 episodes. Then, episode 5 happened. The show's first big action episode, and despite featuring accomplished animators such as Ken Otsuka and Naoki Tate, it hit the ground face first, becoming renowned overnight for its poor animation and bad character art. Ken Otsuka speculated that it was the result of various behind-the-scenes factors piling up and leading to what has since been referred to as a breakdown. And when you consider everything so far, and also look at the staff list for that episode, which consists largely of people who had just worked on episode 2 weeks prior, it's hard not to agree with Otsuka on the matter. And sadly, that poor schedule would come to plague Super's initial days time and again. While the retold material had storyboarding that was considered to be better than the original films, or at least the Resurrection F arc, and the staff did the absolute best that they could with the hand they'd been dealt, the animation quality was very mediocre, having far more moments of laughably dreadful scenes than genuinely impressive cuts, and would remain as such until the mid to late Universe 6 arc, almost an entire year into its broadcast run. But that does beg the question. If the show's visuals were overall poor for the first year, why bring up episode 25 and not, say, 24 or 33? Aside from that being the most infamous demonstration of Super's production woes, I chose to single out that episode because I believe it was the point where a good deal of people realized how important the animation, the overall visual presentation, and a good, long production schedule are to the quality of any TV show. There is an opinion that most people have in relation to films, but especially TV shows. The only things that are important are the script, and by extension, the acting. It doesn't matter if the camera work is mediocre at best, or the music is a meaningless wall of noise, or the editing on the action scenes is as terrible as a Sonic X AMV from 2006, or any of the other production aspects are given the bare minimum of attention. As long as the writing and acting are good, that's all that matters. This is an opinion that is common on pretty much every side of the conversation. The fans, the critics, and the creators often claim as such, and I do understand it. At least speaking from an audience perspective, nobody is born with an instinctive sense of what makes for good or bad television. and when trying to form a critical perspective for the first time, you tend to go for the most immediately obvious aspect that you can recognize, usually the writing and then the acting, since that can often make or break the former. However, choosing to critique any show solely by its script can be a bad path to go down, since it ignores just about every other aspect of what makes for great television, and great film too. What would Cowboy Bebop be without its incredible soundtrack? Would Evangelion be anywhere near as good if its visual storytelling was on par with the latest Joss Whedon Drek? How could something like Perfect Blue worm its way into your mind if the editing was conventional and uninteresting? I bring this all up because episode 5 was something of a turning point in the overall fandom discussion surrounding Dragon Ball's animation. The first 4 episodes of Super were well received, I suspect due to fans still being shocked and amazed that Dragon Ball was on TV again, but the only real discussion being had at the time concerned the character interactions and the prospect of how the show would adapt the Battle of Gods material. Aside from praising a good-looking cut or two, the script and acting were the only things being discussed. But now that fans had a bucket of Arctic water chucked at their faces, they started to engage with the show's visual presentation beyond surface-level traits. Not just the animation, but the storyboarding, the directing, the color design, the backgrounds, the art direction, and more were all being considered and discussed when they previously hadn't, at least not so widely. Folks like AnimeAjay helped to educate the fandom on animator styles through his animation catalog thread on Kanzenshuu, and discussing every episode in his weekly animation breakdown videos. People started to do more research and become more educated about animation production, out of an attempt to better understand and contextualize Super. And in general, fans learn to look beyond the script and see how many elements there are that can make or break a show. Speaking for myself, I started paying more attention to the many aspects that make TV shows great around late 2015, early 2016, and paying attention to Super's production values was a big contributor to that. I began to appreciate animators and artists who I previously didn't pay much mind to, and started doing a bit of digging into the animation industry to see how things operated. In fact, the project I'm currently working on, the 1001 animated films you should watch, would likely have not happened, or at least not so soon, if my fascination in Super's animation production didn't lead me to really start thinking about the medium and the industry. And considering how much more openly and constructively a portion of the fandom have become to discussing the various ins and outs of animation, I'd wager I'm far from the only one who's been changed by this. Of course, I say it is a portion of the Dragon Ball community. You're still gonna get people who shitpost in-betweens for the hell of it, criticize distant character shots as if that's somehow valid in the greater context of the show, or in any other way demonstrate that they don't yet know what the hell they're talking about. But it is worth recognizing that that portion of the Dragon Ball community, the portion that considers the importance of the visual presentation and good production circumstances, has become much bigger and much more visible than it used to be, and I'd credit Super for inadvertently causing that. Hell, it's even got people going back to the original TV run of the series and re-evaluating aspects that had never caught their attention before, appreciating animators like Taichiro Ohara, Kazuya Hisada, and Naotoshi Shida in his early days, paying attention to shots that helped to establish the kind of atmosphere Dragon Ball Z in particular was renowned for, and realizing that even the most pace-breaking or illogical filler segments had really good visual direction or background art, to name a few new insights. There are now more people within the Dragon Ball fandom who pay attention to the animation industry, both on a creative level and a production level, and I believe this can only be a good thing for everyone, since it leads to a better understanding of criticism, what goes into the creation of animation, and that there's so much more to TV shows than just the script. There's the animation for a start. Dragon Ball Super's production woes have eased up to an almost admirable degree since episode 5, but the show never quite managed to completely resolve that bafflingly short deadline. For every episode blessed with great animation, wonderful storyboarding, and sublime art direction, there's another episode cursed with wonky character art, stills, or a good chunk of recycled animation in an attempt to buy more time. This isn't to say that the staff haven't done everything they can to mitigate this, however. One of the show's co-directors, Ryōta Nakamura, spoke in a recent interview about coordinating with the production staff, making improvements to even the smallest parts of the presentation, and correcting these storyboards considerably to make for more exciting battles. Despite the short schedules on hand, animators like Yuya Takahashi, Futoshi Higashide, Kenji Miyuma, and more have managed to craft impressive work that has earned the adoration of many fans. Storyboard artists such as Yoshitaka Yashima and Masato Mitsuka have taken what could have been conservative, uninteresting episodes and made them gripping and atmospheric. Art directors like Bunsun Lee and Nagisa Nishida have guided background artists into producing some stunning artwork that really helps to nail those intended moods. All of them, and Dragon Ball Super staff as a whole, have tried as hard as they could in such terrible circumstances, and that is something to be respected and praised. However, now that Super has come to an end and the franchise is gearing up for that sexy looking 20th movie at the end of the year, maybe the production committee will be able to reflect on everything that's happened and work with Toei to plan a better, longer production schedule, should Dragon Ball ever return to the airwaves. Regardless, I'd say that those production woes did at least lead to a more educated and engaged portion of the Dragon Ball community when it comes to the animation. And that, to me, is the best thing about Dragon Ball Super. Special thanks go out to Yuyucow, AnimeAjay and YTWes for providing information and advice in creating this video.